And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Welcome to Monday's Flying Weather segment here. We've got on the first graphic some IFR in the southern slopes of the Brooks Range for Friday morning. Otherwise, pretty good VFR here over the western interior right into south central Alaska and Cook Inlet, and then marginal VFR in areas here for the Copper River Basin, Kenai Peninsula, turning an arm eastward here across Prince William Sound, and possible IFR over the extreme northern southeast coast. You can see VFR for most of the Panhandle, VFR for most of the Aleutians and the Bering Sea, some marginal VFR up around St. Lawrence Island, and mostly off the coast here over the southeast Bering, and some marginal VFR for the Alaska Peninsula. For the afternoon, that pretty much stays here, marginal VFR for the peninsula there. And eastern Bering Sea seeing marginal VFR in areas here up to St. Lawrence Island, but Nunivak Island and the Yukon Delta VFR right up across Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula. In fact, just about all the western part of the state here looking good into the Tanana Valley VFR. Some marginal VFR over the Koyukuk Valley, but the North Slope VFR, including the Arctic coast with VFR, Susitna Valley right on down into eastern Cook Inlet and the western Kenai Peninsula. VFR for the Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast. And then with that storm system crossing the Queen Charlottes, look for some lower conditions to push in over the southern Panhandle. And then for Wednesday morning, marginal VFR here covers the southeast coastal areas. VFR holds over the Gulf of Alaska here up into southern Alaska. Some areas of marginal VFR north of the Alaska Range here over the eastern interior. That same pattern all the way up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. VFR to the west. Mostly VFR here for the central and western interior areas, as well as south central Alaska. Kodiak, pretty marginal conditions there. And marginal VFR for the northern Bering Sea and the Aleutians, looking at some areas of marginal VFR. But Adak and Atka looking pretty good, VFR. And for the afternoon, some marginal VFR slips eastward here over Atka Island, extending back to the west. On Alaska, Pribilofs there should be mostly VFR right up to Nunivak Island into the southwest and central interior here. IFR now along and south of the Brooks Range. Koba, Koyukuk Valley areas here right on up to the western Arctic coast. And now some IFR possible Wednesday afternoon along the Alaska Range and then cutting southward across the Talkeetnas into western Prince William Sound and eastern and southern Kenai Peninsula. Copper River Basin, though, and the eastern Alaska Range VFR. Marginal VFR for the North Gulf Coast and the southeast coast, mostly marginal VFR. Passes Anatuvik for the day Tuesday. Pretty marginal there, a little bit lower conditions as you head east to Adigan, probably IFR at times throughout the day Tuesday. Lake Clark and Merrill looking marginal. Rainy VFR though, and windy VFR. Isabel, same forecast. Central Eastern Alaska Range looks to be completely VFR for the flying tomorrow, neither approach. Tanita, VFR becoming marginal VFR as moisture comes in from the south and southeast. And for Portage, IFR. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels here at the surface down off the southwest coast here, but north of St. Matthew Island, but staying south of St. Lawrence Island there at 2,000 feet up into the Gulf of Alaska, cutting across the southern Panhandle. So looking at icing, again, that big storm cutting across the center, which cuts across the Queen Charlottes tomorrow. That'll bring a significant increase in the icing potential. Could see some considerable moderate rime icing here for the southern Panhandle. Otherwise, should be icing free over the interior out into the Bering Sea, and a system out to the west pushing a band of heavier icing into the far western Aleutians. Jet stream here, still the strongest winds at 33,000 feet, staying south of the Aleutians there, although 105 knots there over the west central Aleutians. And big trough low pressure here off the Yukon Delta coast. And then another low here tracking east-northeast. The strongest winds at this elevation will be south of the Panhandle there, but still 85 knots. And then taking a look at the 9,000-foot wind flow, we've got 65 knot winds with that big storm heading northeastward there, again toward the Queen Charlottes, coming up into the southern Panhandle. lighter over the interior. Another system here south of the Alaska Peninsula. Easterlies 45 to 60 knots across the Alaska Peninsula. And 3,000 feet, 55-knot easterly winds here across the Alaska Peninsula with this low just south of Sand Point there. Coming back around northerlies on average 55 knots over the Fox Islands there. Easterlies 45 into the Pribilofs. Next front out west, bringing some stronger winds into the western Aleutians later on. High pressure light winds over the interior. And for the southeast coast, with this low tracking up toward the Queen Charlotte, 70-knot winds down that way. But close enough here, big enough storm that'll bring a significant increase in the winds over the southern panhandle. And with that goes quite an area of considerable moderate turbulence here for the southeast coast. All the way down to Vancouver Island. Could be some areas of severe turbulence as well for the Queen Charlottes. And to the south, light turbulence over the interior. And for the Alaska Peninsula, look for considerable moderate for the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the eastern Aleutians. Put the low center right in here somewhere. So that with the northwest winds here on the back side of that, and this with the southeast winds.